The gunfire had stopped an hour before dawn, leaving only smoke and silence across the valley. And when Roswell Jenkins rode through what remained of the settler camp at first light, he found her lying face down in a ditch beside an overturned wagon, her dress torn and blood-stained, her dark hair matted with dirt and dried blood. He dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on debris, and knelt beside her with the weary expectation of finding another corpse. But when he pressed 2 fingers against her neck, he felt the faint flutter of a pulse beneath skin that was far too cold for the California morning in June of 1878. Roswell lifted her carefully, noting the bullet graze along her ribs and the ugly bruise spreading across her temple. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with delicate features now slack with unconsciousness. Her breathing came shallow and irregular. He carried her to his horse, a steady roan gelding named Copper, and secured her as gently as he could across the saddle before mounting behind her. The ride back to his ranch took 2 hours, and he spent every minute of it keeping her balanced and trying not to think about the 15 dead he had counted in the camp, men and women and 2 children, all victims of the raid that had swept through in the night. His ranch sat in a valley 12 miles south of Porterville, California, a modest spread with a main house, a barn, and a few outbuildings. He had built most of it himself over the past 6 years, carving out a life from hard work and harder lessons. At 30 years old, Roswell had learned to rely on himself and trust few others. The lawless violence that plagued the territory had taught him that much. He brought her inside and laid her on his bed, the only real bed in the house. Then he set about the work of saving her life. He cleaned the bullet wound first, relieved to find it had only carved a shallow channel through the flesh along her ribcage. The head wound worried him more. He bathed it carefully, feeling for fractures in the skull, and found none. But the bruising suggested a severe concussion, and he knew the next few days would determine whether she lived or died. She burned with fever that first night. Roswell sat beside the bed with cool water and clean cloths, bathing her face and neck, trying to bring the temperature down. She thrashed and murmured incoherently, speaking names he did not recognize and crying out warnings that came too late. He held her hands when the thrashing grew violent, afraid she would tear open her wounds. By the 3rd day, the fever broke, but she did not wake. She lay still and pale, her breathing steadier but her eyes closed, locked in some place beyond his reach. Roswell continued to care for her, spooning water and thin broth between her lips, changing the bandages, keeping her clean. He moved his own bedroll to the main room and slept on the floor. On the 7th day, her eyes opened. He was sitting beside the bed, mending a bridle when he felt her watching him. He looked up and found her staring at him with eyes the color of dark honey, confused and afraid. "You are safe," he said quietly. "You are at my ranch. I found you after the raid." She tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Water." He brought her water and supported her head while she drank. She managed only a few sips before exhaustion claimed her again, but it was progress. Over the next week, she woke more frequently and stayed awake longer each time. He learned her name was Willa Sinclair, and she had been traveling with her brother and his family to start a new life in California. The raiders had come in the night, brutal and efficient. She remembered hiding beneath the wagon, remembered the gunfire and the screaming, remembered nothing after something struck her head. "My brother?" she asked, though her eyes already held the answer. "I am sorry," Roswell said. "There were no survivors that I found." She turned her face to the wall and wept silently. He left her alone with her grief, knowing there were no words that could ease it. The days stretched into weeks. Willa grew stronger slowly, but her injuries had been severe. The headaches came frequently, leaving her dizzy and nauseous. Her ribs ached with every breath. Roswell helped her sit up, then stand, then take a few steps around the room. He cooked simple meals and made sure she ate. He brought her books from his small collection and sat reading while she rested. They spoke little at first, both comfortable with silence. But as June gave way to July and the California heat settled over the valley, they began to talk. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her brother Samuel, who had been 10 years her senior and had practically raised her after their parents died. She told him about Samuel's wife Margaret and their 2 children, little Thomas and baby Anne. She told him about the excitement of the journey west and the hope they had all carried for a better future. Roswell told her about Texas, where he had been born, and about losing his own family to cholera when he was 17. He told her about drifting west, working cattle drives and mining camps, saving every dollar until he could buy this land. He told her about the loneliness of building a life alone and the satisfaction of creating something lasting. "Why did you never marry?" Willa asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. Roswell was quiet for a long moment. "Never found the right woman, I suppose, and this country is not easy on women. I would not ask someone to share this life unless she truly wanted it." "It seems a good life to me," Willa said softly. "Quiet, honest." He looked at her, sitting in the rocking chair he had made last winter, her dark hair loose around her shoulders and her face turned toward the fading light. She was beautiful, he realized, though not in any way he could have described. It was something in the strength that was returning to her features, in the determined set of her jaw, in the way she faced each day despite the grief she carried. By August, Willa was well enough to help around the house. She insisted on it, saying she could not continue to impose on his hospitality without contributing. Roswell protested that she was still recovering, but she was stubborn. She took over the cooking, and he discovered that meals could be something more than merely functional. She mended his clothes, which had been in desperate need of attention. She kept the house clean and started a small garden near the kitchen. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership that felt natural and right. Roswell worked the ranch, tending his small herd of cattle and horses, mending fences and maintaining the buildings. Willa managed the household and gradually took on more tasks. She learned to milk the cow and feed the chickens. She helped him in the barn, mucking stalls and stacking hay. They talked while they worked, sharing stories and opinions and dreams. Roswell found himself laughing more than he had in years. Willa had a sharp wit and a way of seeing humor in small things. She also had a fierce intelligence and asked questions about everything from cattle breeding to politics. He enjoyed the conversations, enjoyed having someone to share his thoughts with after so many years alone, but he was also increasingly aware of her as a woman. The way she moved, graceful despite the lingering pain in her ribs. The sound of her voice, warm and clear. The smile that transformed her face when something pleased her. He found himself watching for that smile, finding small ways to earn it. He knew he was falling in love with her, and the knowledge troubled him. She was his guest, a woman he had rescued and cared for. She was vulnerable, grieving, and dependent on him. It would be wrong to take advantage of that, to burden her with feelings she might not share and might feel obligated to return. So he kept his distance, careful not to touch her more than necessary, keeping his tone friendly but not intimate. Willa, for her part, found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy who had saved her life. Roswell was unlike any man she had known. He was gentle and patient, yet she had seen the strength in him, the competence with which he handled every task. He was thoughtful and considerate, always asking what she needed, always aware of her comfort. He treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and listening to her ideas. She noticed other things too. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the laugh lines around his eyes, the capable hands that could be so gentle when he had changed her bandages those first weeks. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what he was doing, looking forward to his return when he rode out to check the herd. But she was also afraid. Afraid of being a burden, of owing him too much, of mistaking gratitude for something deeper. And afraid of loving someone and losing them the way she had lost everyone else. The grief was still raw, still painful. Some mornings she woke and forgot, just for a moment, that Samuel and Margaret and the children were gone. Then memory would crash back, and the pain would be fresh and terrible all over again. One evening in late August, a storm rolled through the valley. Thunder cracked overhead and rain hammered the roof. Willa stood at the window watching lightning split the sky. Roswell came to stand beside her. "It will pass soon," he said. "These summer storms blow through fast." She nodded, but her hands were clenched tight. "The night of the raid, there was a storm," she said quietly. "I think that is why we did not hear them coming until they were already in the camp." Roswell understood. "You are safe here," he said. "I promise you that." She turned to look at him, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "I know," she whispered. "I have never felt safer than I do here with you." The air between them seemed to charge with something that had nothing to do with the storm. Roswell wanted to reach for her, to pull her close, but he held himself still. "Willa," he began, not sure what he meant to say. A tremendous crash of thunder made them both jump, and the moment broke. Willa laughed shakily. "I think I will make tea," she said, and moved away toward the kitchen. Roswell let her go, his heart pounding harder than the thunder had any right to cause. September brought cooler weather and a new set of challenges. The cattle needed to be moved to lower pasture, the hay needed to be cut and stored, and a section of fence on the northern boundary had to be replaced. Roswell worked long days, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark. He hated being away from the house, away from Willa, but the work had to be done. Willa kept herself busy. She preserved vegetables from the garden, made jam from the wild berries that grew near the creek, and sewed new curtains for the windows. She also began to think seriously about her future. She had been at Roswell's ranch for 3 months now. She was fully recovered, strong and healthy. She could not stay here forever, imposing on his kindness, but the thought of leaving filled her with a hollow ache. She had no family left, no reason to continue to California, and no way to return to Missouri even if she wanted to. She had no money, no possessions except the clothes Roswell had bought for her in town. She needed to find work, to become independent. But work for women in this territory was limited to cooking, cleaning, sewing, or working in saloons, and the latter was not something she would consider. She brought up the subject one evening over dinner. "I have been thinking," she said carefully. "I need to find employment. Perhaps in Porterville. There might be families who need help, or the hotel might need a cook." Roswell set down his fork and looked at her with an expression she could not read. "You want to leave?" "I cannot stay here indefinitely," Willa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You have been more than generous, but I need to make my own way." "You have been making your own way," Roswell said. "You work as hard as any ranch hand I ever employed. This place runs better with you here than it ever did with just me." "That is kind of you to say, but it is not kindness, it is truth." He stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to her. "If you want to leave, I will not stop you, but I would like you to stay." Willa's heart began to race. "Why?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because I have come to care for you," he said quietly. More than I should, probably, more than is wise, but there it is. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Roswell, you do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I know you might not feel the same. I know you might just be grateful, and I know you are still grieving. I do not expect anything from you, but I needed you to know the truth before you made any decisions about leaving. Willa crossed the room to stand in front of him. She reached up and placed her hand against his cheek, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. You foolish man, she said softly. Do you really not know? I have been in love with you for weeks now. I was just afraid to say anything because I thought you saw me as an obligation, someone you had to take care of. Roswell stared at her, and then a slow smile spread across his face, the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. An obligation, he said. Willa, you are the best thing that has happened to me in my entire life. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle at first and then deeper as she responded, her arms coming around his neck. It was a kiss full of relief and joy and promise, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathless. Stay, Roswell said, resting his forehead against hers. Please stay. Not as my guest, not as my employee, but as my partner, as my wife if you will have me. Willa felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will stay. Yes, I will marry you. They were married in Porterville in October, a simple ceremony with the justice of the peace and 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. Willa wore a new dress that Roswell had insisted on buying, a soft blue that matched the autumn sky. Roswell wore his best suit, carefully brushed and pressed. He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her and cherish her for the rest of his life, and she made the same promise in return. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon sunlight, and Willa felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was home now. This valley, this house, this man beside her. She had lost so much, and the grief would always be part of her. But she had also found something precious and unexpected. She had found love. That night, they lay together in the bed where she had first woken 3 months earlier, and Roswell held her close, still hardly believing she was his. I will spend every day trying to make you happy, he murmured against her hair. Willa turned in his arms to face him, her eyes soft in the lamplight. You already make me happy, she said. You gave me back my life. You gave me a reason to live when I had lost everything. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel anything but grief again. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You did the same for me, he said. I did not realize how lonely I was until you were here. You brought light into this house, into my life. I love you, Willa Jenkins. She smiled at the sound of her new name. I love you, Roswell Jenkins. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other with patience and care. It was new for both of them, a gift they had saved for marriage, and it felt sacred and right. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly about the future they would build together. Life settled into a new pattern. They worked the ranch together, true partners in every sense. Willa proved to be a natural with horses, and Roswell taught her to ride properly. She took over the training of the younger horses, discovering she had a gift for it. Roswell expanded the herd, buying more cattle and improving the stock. They talked about building a bigger barn and maybe adding a room to the house. November brought the first hard frost, and they spent the long evenings indoors, sitting by the fire. Roswell taught Willa to play chess, and she beat him within a week, much to his amused chagrin. She read aloud to him while he worked on tack or carved small pieces of wood. They played cards and talked and simply enjoyed being together. In December, Willa realized she was pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Roswell, and when she finally did, on Christmas morning, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, before carefully setting her down and asking if she was all right, if she needed anything, if she should be resting. "I am pregnant, not ill," she said, laughing. "But yes, I am well. Very well." He placed his hand gently on her still, flat belly. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said. "You have given me everything, Willa. A home, a family, a future. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," she said softly. "And I will spend the rest of my life loving you." The winter was mild by California standards, but they stayed close to home, not wanting to take any chances with Willa's pregnancy. She remained healthy and strong, working alongside Roswell through the early months. As she began to show, he became increasingly protective, trying to stop her from doing anything strenuous. She found it both endearing and exasperating. "I am not fragile," she told him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know that," he said, "but you are carrying something precious and I want to keep both of you safe." She softened at that. "We are safe," she promised. "We have you." In March, Willa woke one morning feeling different. She told Roswell she thought the baby might come soon, and he immediately rode to Porterville to fetch the doctor and a midwife. They arrived by evening, just as Willa's labor began in earnest. Roswell stayed with her through it all, holding her hand, supporting her, whispering encouragement. It was a long night and a difficult labor, but when dawn broke, their son was born. He came into the world wailing lustily, healthy and strong, with dark hair like his mother and his father's gray eyes. "Samuel," Willa said, looking down at the baby in her arms. "We will name him Samuel after my brother." Roswell felt emotion tighten his throat. He touched his son's tiny hand and watched the small fingers curl around his own. "Samuel Jenkins," he said. "It is a good name, a strong name." The doctor and midwife stayed for another day, making sure both Willa and the baby were doing well. Then they returned to town, leaving the new family alone. Roswell proved to be a devoted father. He would sit for hours just watching Samuel sleep, marveling at the tiny perfection of him. He changed diapers and walked the floor during fussy nights and sang off key lullabies that somehow always worked. Willa watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love with him. Life with a baby was exhausting and wonderful. Samuel was a good baby, but he still needed constant care. Willa and Roswell took turns with the night feedings and learned to function on very little sleep. They laughed at their mistakes and celebrated small victories. The first smile, the first time Samuel held his head up, the first laugh. As spring turned to summer, Samuel grew and thrived. Roswell built a cradle that could be moved from room to room so Willa could keep the baby close while she worked. They took Samuel outside to feel the sunshine and the breeze. They talked to him constantly, telling him about the ranch and the animals and the life he would grow into. One evening in June, almost exactly a year after Roswell had found Willa in that ditch, they sat on the porch together. Samuel slept in Willa's arms and Roswell had his arm around her shoulders. The sun was setting over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "A year ago I was dying," Willa said quietly. "Everything I knew was gone, and I was lying in the dirt waiting for the end." Roswell tightened his arm around her. "Do not think about that." "No, I want to," she said. "Because look at what happened instead. You found me. You saved me. You gave me a new life, a life I never imagined I could have. You gave me love and a home and a family." She looked down at their sleeping son. "You gave me everything. You gave me everything," Roswell countered. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions, working, surviving. You made me live again. You made me whole." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We saved each other then." "I suppose we did," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. The future stretched ahead of them, unknown and full of possibilities. There would be challenges, Willa knew. The territory was still wild and often dangerous. Ranching was hard work with no guarantees, but she was not afraid. With Roswell beside her, she could face anything. The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a sturdy, adventurous little boy with his mother's curiosity and his father's steady temperament. When he was 2, Willa gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. She had Roswell's gray eyes and Willa's dark hair and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. The ranch prospered. Roswell's reputation as an honest dealer and a skilled rancher spread, and he was able to sell his cattle at good prices. They bought more land, expanding their holdings. Willa's horse training business grew as well, and people came from as far as Sacramento to buy horses she had trained. They built the bigger barn Roswell had dreamed of, and they added 2 rooms to the house, one for the children and one for guests. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the ranch work, giving Roswell more time with his family. Willa never forgot the family she had lost. She told Samuel and Rose about their uncle and aunt and cousins, keeping their memories alive. Every year on the anniversary of the raid, she and Roswell rode out to the site where the camp had been. They had placed markers there for Samuel's family, simple wooden crosses that they kept maintained. They stood together in silence for a few minutes, and then they rode home to the life they had built from tragedy. When Samuel was 5 and Rose was 3, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1884, she gave birth to another son. They named him Daniel, and he completed their family in a way Willa had not known it needed completing. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters. There were sick animals and broken equipment. There were moments of worry and frustration. But through it all, Willa and Roswell faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in October of 1888. The children were old enough now to understand the significance of the day. Samuel, at 9, was already showing signs of becoming a fine young man, responsible and kind. Rose, at 7, was bright and imaginative, always creating stories and games. Daniel, at 4, was the baby of the family, sweet and affectionate. That evening, after the children were in bed, Willa and Roswell sat on the porch in their usual spots. Roswell took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band she still wore. 10 years, he said. It has gone so fast. The best 10 years of my life, Willa said. Mine too. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. I love you more now than I did the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but it is true. Willa felt the familiar warmth spread through her chest, the feeling that still came whenever he spoke to her this way. I love you the same way, she said. More with every day that passes. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting against him the way she always had, perfectly matched. They sat that way for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the occasional lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the whisper of wind through the grass. You ever think about that day? Roswell asked quietly. The day I found you. Sometimes, Willa admitted. Less often now than I used to. But yes, sometimes. I think about it often, he said. I think about how easily I could have ridden a different direction, how close I came to never meeting you. It terrifies me, even now. But you did not ride a different direction, Willa said firmly. You found me. You saved me. And everything that has happened since has been because of that choice you made to stop, to check, to care. Best decision I ever made, Roswell said. Second best, Willa corrected with a smile. The best was asking me to marry you, he laughed. I stand corrected. They fell silent again, content in each other's presence. The years had taught them that words were not always necessary. Sometimes just being together was enough. As the children grew older, they became more involved in the ranch work. Samuel learned to rope and ride and handle cattle. Rose discovered she had her mother's gift with horses and began helping with the training. Daniel was still young, but he followed his father everywhere, eager to learn and help. Willa watched her children grow and felt a bittersweet mixture of pride and sadness. They were becoming independent, which was right and good, but it also meant her time of having them close and small was ending. She treasured every moment, knowing how quickly it would all pass. Roswell saw the wistfulness in her face sometimes and understood it. He felt it too, the awareness that this phase of their lives would not last forever. But he also looked forward to what came next, to seeing what kind of adults their children would become, to growing old with Willa beside him. In 1892, when Samuel was 13, he asked his father about the day they had met, about the raid and what had happened. Roswell and Willa had always been honest with the children about their history, but they had not gone into great detail about the violence of that day. Now, sitting with his oldest son, Roswell told him the full story. He described the devastation of the camp, the bodies he had found, the moment he discovered Willa barely alive. He talked about the 3 months of nursing her back to health and the way they had fallen in love. Samuel listened intently, his young face serious. "You saved her," he said when Roswell finished. "She saved me too," Roswell said. "That is important to understand, son. Love is not about one person rescuing another. It is about 2 people choosing to build a life together, supporting each other through everything." "Is that what you and Ma have?" Samuel asked. "That is exactly what we have," Roswell confirmed. Samuel nodded, absorbing this. "That is what I want someday," he said. "What you and Ma have." Roswell clapped his son on the shoulder. "Then I have taught you the most important lesson," he said. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. By the mid-1890s, Roswell and Willa had built one of the most successful operations in the region. They employed several ranch hands and had become respected members of the community. Roswell served on the town council for a time, and Willa helped establish a school in Porterville. They also opened their home to others in need. Over the years, they took in several people who were struggling, offering work and a place to stay until they could get back on their feet. Willa understood what it was like to have lost everything, and she never turned away anyone who genuinely needed help. In 1897, when Willa was 41 and Roswell was 49, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children were now 19, 17, and 13, nearly grown. The house felt both fuller and emptier than it had in years, as the children came and went, pursuing their own interests while still being part of the family. That anniversary, Roswell surprised Willa with a trip to San Francisco. They left the ranch in Samuel's capable hands and took the train to the city. It was Willa's first time traveling for pleasure, and she was excited as a child. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at restaurants, and walked along the waterfront. They attended the theater and shopped in stores filled with goods from around the world. But the best part was simply being together, away from the responsibilities of the ranch, able to focus entirely on each other. They stayed up late talking and slept late in the mornings. They held hands while walking through the city and stole kisses when no one was looking. They felt young again, like the couple who had first fallen in love nearly 20 years earlier. "Thank you for this," Willa said on their last evening as they watched the sun set over the bay. "Thank you for 20 years," Roswell replied. "20 years of happiness I never thought I would have." "We have a good life," Willa said contentedly. "The best life," Roswell agreed. They returned home to find everything running smoothly. Samuel had handled every problem that arose with competence and good judgment. Roswell felt a surge of pride in his son and a sense of peace about the future. The ranch would continue after he was gone, in good hands. The new century arrived, bringing changes to the territory. California was no longer the wild frontier it had been when Roswell first arrived. Towns were growing into cities, railroads connected distant places, and the old ways were fading. But some things remained constant. The land still demanded hard work. Families still needed love and care. And the bond between a man and woman who had chosen each other could still weather any storm. In 1902, Samuel married a young woman named Catherine, whom he had been courting for 2 years. The wedding was held at the ranch, with the whole community invited. Willa watched her son exchange vows and felt her eyes fill with tears, remembering her own wedding day and the joy and hope she had felt. "He will be happy," Roswell murmured, standing beside her. "I know," Willa said. "He chose well. She is a good woman." "He learned from the best," Roswell said, taking her hand. A year later, Samuel and Catherine presented them with their first grandchild, a daughter they named Willa in honor of her grandmother. Holding the baby, Willa felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought about the family she had lost so many years ago, about little Thomas and baby Anne who had never had the chance to grow up. She could not have them back, but she could pour her love into this new generation, into this baby girl who carried her name. Rose married in 1905, choosing a schoolteacher from Porterville who shared her love of books and learning. They settled in town, but Rose visited the ranch often, unable to stay away from the horses and the land she loved. Daniel, the youngest, showed no signs of wanting to leave. He loved ranching and had a natural talent for it. He worked alongside his father and brother, learning everything they could teach him about managing the land and the cattle. As Willa and Roswell grew older, they gradually handed over more of the daily responsibilities to their children. It was not easy to step back from work that had defined their lives for so long, but they also found freedom in it. They had more time to spend together, more time to simply enjoy the life they had built. They took more trips, visiting Rose and her family in Porterville, traveling to see parts of California they had never explored. They attended church socials and community events. They sat on the porch for hours, talking or silent, content in each other's company. In 1908, on a warm June evening 30 years after Roswell had found Willa in that ditch, they sat in their accustomed places on the porch. Grandchildren played in the yard, and the sounds of their laughter drifted on the breeze. Samuel and Catherine lived in the house they had built on the eastern edge of the property. Daniel still lived in the main house with them, though he was courting a girl from town and would likely marry soon. 30 years, Willa said, echoing the thought from their 10th anniversary. "Where did the time go? Into this," Roswell said, gesturing to encompass everything around them. "Into the ranch, the children, the grandchildren, into every day we spent together." "I would not change a single moment," Willa said. "Neither would I," Roswell agreed. He reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers in the familiar gesture that still sent warmth through her after all these years. "You are still the most beautiful thing I ever found." Willa laughed. "You found me covered in dirt and blood and nearly dead." "And you were still beautiful," he insisted. "But I meant it differently. You are the most beautiful thing in my life, the best thing, the only thing that really matters." She leaned over and kissed him softly. "You are my everything too," she whispered. They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The grandchildren were called inside for supper, their voices fading into the house. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of grass and horses and home. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Willa asked. "When I woke up, I said you were safe," Roswell replied. "And I have been," Willa said. "Every day since then I have been safe with you, safe and loved and cherished." "As you will be for the rest of our lives," Roswell promised. And he kept that promise. Through the years that followed, as they grew older together, as their children's children had children of their own, as the world changed around them but their love remained constant. Through everything, they stayed true to each other and to the vows they had made in Porterville on that October day in 1878. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1928, surrounded by 3 generations of family. The ranch that Roswell had built alone, and that he and Willa had expanded together, was now a thriving enterprise run by their sons and grandsons. The house had been added onto several times to accommodate family gatherings. The land that had once seemed empty and lonely was now full of life and love. At their anniversary celebration, Samuel stood to make a toast. He was 49 now, the age his father had been when Samuel was born, a successful rancher with grown children of his own. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what love looks like. Who built not just a ranch but a family. Who taught us that the greatest wealth is not in land or cattle, but in the people we love and who love us in return." Everyone raised their glasses and drank, and Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears, grateful tears. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, at the family that had come from the love between her and Roswell, and she felt overwhelmed with blessing. That night, lying in bed beside her husband of 50 years, Willa thought about the girl she had been, lying in a ditch waiting to die. She thought about the man who had stopped, who had checked for life, who had carried her to safety. She thought about 3 months of patient care and gentle kindness. She thought about falling in love and choosing to stay and building a life together. "What are you thinking?" Roswell asked, his voice rough with age but still beloved. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Willa said. "How lucky we are. We could have missed each other so easily. If you had ridden a different direction, if I had died before you found me, if either of us had made different choices." "But we did not," Roswell said firmly, pulling her close. "I found you, you chose to stay, we fell in love, and we built this beautiful life together." "We did," Willa agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "We really did." They fell asleep that way, holding each other, grateful for every moment they had been given. Grateful for love that had lasted through 3 months of nursing and 50 years of marriage. Grateful for a life neither of them could have imagined when they first met. The years continued to pass. Roswell and Willa grew frail with age but remained devoted to each other. They could no longer work the ranch, but they sat on the porch every evening, watching the sun set over the land they loved. They held hands and talked about the past and the people they loved. They told stories to great-grandchildren who sat at their feet, wide-eyed with wonder. In the spring of 1932, Roswell became ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a gradual fading, the body wearing out after 82 years of hard use. He knew he was dying, and he was not afraid. He had lived a full life, a good life, and he was ready, but he worried about Willa. She was 76, still strong in mind if not in body, and he hated the thought of leaving her alone. "I will be all right," she told him, sitting beside his bed and holding his hand. "I am sad, but I will be all right. We have had 54 years together. That is more than most people get. I am grateful for every single day." "I love you," Roswell said, his voice weak but clear. "From the moment I saw you, even lying in that ditch, I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much. I love you too, Willa said, tears streaming down her face. You gave me everything. A life, a home, a family, a love that has sustained me through everything. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. It was my honor, Roswell whispered. He died that evening peacefully with Willa holding his hand, and their children gathered around. Willa sat with him for a long time after he was gone, memorizing his face one last time, saying goodbye to the man who had been her everything for more than half a century. The grief was deep and real, but Willa did not break under it. She had learned long ago that grief and love were two sides of the same coin, that you could not have one without the other. She mourned Roswell, but she also celebrated the life they had shared. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by family. Her children and grandchildren made sure she was never alone, never without help or company. She spent her days sitting on the porch, watching the life of the ranch continue around her. She told stories about Roswell to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive. Willa lived for 3 more years after Roswell died. In the summer of 1935, she simply did not wake up one morning. She died peacefully in her sleep, at the age of 79, in the bed she had shared with Roswell for 54 years. They buried her next to him on a hillside overlooking the valley, in the place they had both loved best. The whole community came to the funeral, testifying to the impact the couple had made on everyone who knew them. At the graveside, Samuel spoke again. He was 66 now, his own hair gray, his own body bent from years of ranch work. My parents were ordinary people who lived in extraordinary love, he said. They taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day, a choice to stay, to work, to forgive, to grow together. They showed us that the greatest adventures are not found in far-off places, but in building a life with someone you love, in raising a family, in being faithful to your commitments. He paused, looking at his mother's casket. My father found my mother in a ditch, barely alive, after a raid that killed her entire family. He nursed her back to health for 3 months. They fell in love and married and built this ranch and raised us and created a legacy that will last for generations. That is the story. But the real story is in all the days in between, all the small moments of kindness and love, all the choices they made to honor each other and cherish what they had built together. There was not a dry eye among the mourners. They all knew the story, knew the legend of Roswell and Willa Jenkins. But hearing it again, standing on the hillside where they would rest together for eternity, made it real and immediate. After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch house. They shared memories and told stories, laughing and crying together. They talked about keeping the ranch going, about honoring the legacy Roswell and Willa had left them. Young Willa, Samuel's daughter who was now 40 and had children of her own, stood looking at the old photographs that covered the walls. There was one of her grandparents on their wedding day, young and hopeful. Another from their 25th anniversary, mature and confident. One from their 50th, old but still clearly in love, their hands clasped tightly together. They really had something special, she said to her father. Samuel nodded. They did, but it was not magic and it was not easy. It was choice and commitment and hard work. It was choosing love every single day, even when things were difficult. I want that, young Willa said, what they had. Then find someone worth choosing, Samuel advised. And be someone worth choosing. That is what they would tell you. The legacy of Roswell and Willa Jenkins lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through generations. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of how love could bloom even in the darkest circumstances. Decades later, when the last person who had known them personally was gone, the story still remained. It was written down, preserved, shared with new generations. The ranch itself became a historic landmark, recognized for its role in California ranching history. But more than that, it was remembered as the home of a great love story. Visitors walking the land could stand on the hillside where Roswell and Willa were buried and look out over the valley they had loved. They could visit the house where the couple had lived and loved and raised their family. They could see the barn Roswell had built and the corral where Willa had trained horses. They could imagine the two of them sitting on that porch, holding hands, watching the sunset, content in the life they had created together. And if they knew the story, if they understood what had brought these two people together, and what had kept them together through 54 years of marriage, they might understand something important about love. That it is not just about the grand gestures or the dramatic moments. It is about the choice to stay, to care, to build something together. It is about 3 months of patient nursing and 54 years of faithful partnership. It is about finding someone in the worst moment of their life and choosing to help them heal, and then choosing every day after to keep loving them. That was the real story of Roswell and Willa Jenkins. Not just that he found her in a ditch after a raid. Not just that he nursed her back to health for 3 months, but that they fell in love and chose each other and built a life together that endured through every challenge and blessing the years brought them. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard times and harsh conditions, of violence and loss. But more than that, it was a love story. And love stories, the real ones that last, are always about choice and commitment and the daily decision to honor and cherish the person you have chosen to share your life with. Roswell and Willa Jenkins understood that. They lived it. And in doing so, they created something that outlasted them both, a legacy of love that continued to inspire long after they were gone. On summer evenings, when the California sun sets over the valley in shades of gold and pink, you can almost see them there on that porch. An old cowboy and the woman he saved, sitting side by side, hands clasped, watching the day end. Still together, still in love, still grateful for every moment they were given. That is how their story ends and how their love lives on forever.